This is Father Jacob Bertrand Janczyk.
And this is Father Bonaventure Chapman.
Welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly donation on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Father Bonaventure.
Father Jacob Bertrand.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Hanover, still filming in the new setup with the studio here. I'm sure our listeners are tired of hearing about it, but it's still exciting. It's still exciting for us because it reminds us of the old days when we used to do this together in our rooms. In your vocations office, I think, for some of these things, surrounded on one microphone.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way.
Years and years. Back when we were young.
Back when we were young, yeah.
Yeah. But today we're doing an episode that I guess usually you and I wouldn't do, not because there's a ban on us talking about these sort of things, but you and Father Gregory seem to do a lot of the literature and like film stuff.
Yes.
But we're gonna take a what at it? Take a crack. Take a crack.
We should do an album together one too. Leave a comment. Maybe we should do a musical album one too, because we've done art and literature and movies, but we haven't done like going through an album and talking through, because albums are no one listens to albums anymore. I think because of YouTube and
no one reads books anymore either.
That's true. It's all the codex again. Yeah. The scroll again. But anyway, yes, we're gonna do one film, a deep dive into a film that particularly caught your eye.
Yes. We're going to talk about Arrival, the movie Arrival. I believe it came out in 2016.
That's right.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you remember the director's name?
Yeah, Denis Villeneuve.
Okay.
You can look. We've done I'm sure that's not how it's pronounced. It's something like New Village, whatever. Villeneuve. He's a French Canadian, and if you want to, there's an episode with Father Gregory and I talking about some of just him in general. But yes, so he was the director of Arrival.
Yeah, so we're going to talk. So check him out if you want. He did other movies.
He did
a Timothée Chalamet movie, right?
Dune 1, and he's going to do Dune 2.
Okay.
He might have done one before that, but
Yeah, and we talked about, we did a
we did a
Chalamet episode with Beautiful Boy. That was that movie that we talked about. So
weird.
We're coming back to the same same director, but some of his films. So obviously they're catching our attention. But Arrival came out in 2016. I guess I don't know. The summary is less important to me in my mind, but like the themes,
maybe set the background for those who haven't seen it. It's a first contact movie, So it's a movie about humanity's first contact with an alien race,
right?
And the beautiful part is, you would think that there are certain parts of that genre. That's the mystery to it. There's also the first contact of seeing them. There's also how you get to design the aliens, why they're there, the standard stuff. So it's like there's a trope of these kind of movies. But Arrival might be one of the best in this trope for a number of reasons we'll talk about. In the way that, for instance, there's a Clue murder mystery genre, right? And Knives Out might be the best current of that genre.
Yeah.
I think Arrival, in terms of a first contact movie, for a number of reasons we'll talk about, I think is the current leader of that genre.
Yeah, I think that's right. I would say so, because it kind of starts with the way. We'll give you a quick summary in a second, but it kind of starts in the way that other first contact kind of alien type things start, where there's a character is clearly going to be the main character, but it's also you have like these military things going on. So like she's a linguist. Her name is Louise Banks. She's a linguist. She's teaching at a school, and they're like the announcement of these spaceships are on the news and stuff. So she's a university professor. So like classes are dismissed, and as they're kind of everybody's leaving and scattering in kind of an ordered, kind of a chaotic way, there are like fighter jets flying over. So you have this sort of what would lend you to think that it's going to be kind of a cliche kind of
Independence Day kind of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
But turns out it's not.
Everything's
really
kind of different. Everything, but but still weird, and it still has the military possibilities, which I think, to my mind, is instead of the military as being a response, so Independence Day, that kind of first contact movie, where the military was a response to something of a real threat, in this case, the military involved in it is our projection onto. So there's a deep psychological element to even in this aspect of the military involved, because it's like what we humans do to outsiders. We just expect, of course, they're going to be trying to do something to us. So the military is all a projection on them, as opposed to a response to them actually threatening this way. So even the military, which is, you have to have fighter, F-16s and military people when you have this stuff, rightfully so. If aliens show up, I want the military there, right? But it's even in that a critique of how humans are more likely to go to combat with each other or to be suspicious of others, of being damaged or hurt.
Yeah, I think that's right in ways, and not in ways. That's usually, we usually say in ways when we're going to correct. Like, yeah, you're right in some way, but let me correct you. But no, I think that's correct. So before we get into the themes and kind of dig at that a little bit more, why don't I kind of set the scene of just kind of flesh it out a bit.
Lay it out.
I'll lay it out. So we have, so as we've already said, first encounter, aliens come to Earth, and they come to Earth in these space ships that don't really look like ships. By the way, I guess
pistachios or half pistachios.
Yeah. As with, I imagine all of our literature and film movies, there will be spoiler alerts. There will be spoilers, so here's a spoiler alert. We're not going to save the ending because we're going to talk about these things. So if you want to watch the movie and not know what happens and be surprised, don't listen to the podcast. We'll listen to the podcast later. So aliens arrive in these weird shaped kind of half like almond.
Yeah, half almond slivers. Yeah. They're almond slivers,
and they are, it's not just one, there are 12, right? It's 12 ships,
12 ships around
throughout the world.
Yep.
So there are 12 ships throughout the world. And as the movie goes, you learn that each kind of area, because there are multiple in like some country, like Russia has a couple and that sort of thing, but so each country or the groups of people where these ships are trying to figure out why they're there in their own kind of way. And we're focused on the ship in the US, and here you have Louise Banks, who's a linguist, who's invited, sort of like coerced into coming, not coerced, but like strongly encouraged to come and help like be part of this team who is trying to communicate with the aliens. So she does that. And through, I guess, the progression of the movie, they go into the ship. They're every I forgot what the interval is, but every 8 hours, every 16 hours, 14 hours, something like that. The ship kind of opens and they're brought up into the ship, and they have this interaction with these aliens that kind of look like octopus squid things.
This is the nice, the heptapods.
Yep.
Well, I think got 7. They've got 7 legs.
So not octopus.
But the thing is, though, one of the things most impressed is it has one of the best first contact scenes of any movie, because it is so hard to make first contact scenes of an alien not be ridiculous, because an alien to be an alien has to be something super different. It's the first contact scenes where it's just a smaller guy with a big head or something. That kind of, the aliens just turn out to be like us. I mean, Star Trek just forgets this entirely and just says we're going to put ridges on Klingons and put weird ears on Vulcans and not try to do the total alien.
Yeah.
But anytime you have other, like signs, for instance, when you actually finally see one up close, not scary. This is true for most alien movies, to get a first contact scene. Whereas this one, what they do a good job of is making the first contact scene not ridiculous, but actually alien, like as best as you would imagine, because these things are not what you would have imagined to look like. And the sounds and the sights, they're in this kind of floating chamber.
There's a physical like glass. What would
some kind of thing, and it's not clear whether this is water or not. Everything's alien enough without being just a caricature of aliens. It's as if this would be what a total alien situation would be like, and it's a brilliant first contact scene. Yeah,
even the way they like come into the ship, right? Because they come in, the ship is like this almond slice sliver half standing vertically. It's tall, and they come in from the bottom of the ship. They're on like one of those like construction things that they're kind of like a portable elevator type. I'm sure you would, right? And when they step off of it,
they get to a certain point and gravity has changed, and then they're drawn up so that exactly
so they
right.
They shift 90 degrees, and then they start walking up, but for them it's walking flat, and so everything from the physical kind of layout and orientation, you're just disoriented by it, which I think does that task of sort of making everything different. You can't get your bearings right away. You don't know what's going on.
Which is what that would feel like.
Yeah. So they go in at these intervals, and Louise is tasked with communicating, figuring out why they're there, what they're doing. And because she's a linguist, you have the sort of juxtaposition of the sort of the urgency that the military and the government feels of figuring out something before something gets blown up,
right?
And then Louise, who does things based on like linguistics, we have to establish like verb.
Takes
noun,
time.
syntax.
We have to figure out if they speak a language, how that language is structured. We have to teach, if it's not close to ours, which seems unlikely, we have to teach them ours just as we learn theirs.
Yep.
I mean, so because for instance, any linguist that goes out into the world, and this is something that church had to deal with and they're translating this to come up with, but we all have vocal cords. We're speaking to monkeys or like parrots or things. We spread the gospel to humans, and we know that we all have vocal cords and basically make the same. So there's at least a lot of base, even if the grammar structure is different. Most languages have a sort of verb-noun structure that at least you can shoehorn them into that quick.
Yeah.
With this one, these things don't have voices or anything like that. So you've got, again, totally alien. So it's going to take time to learn and exchange this sort of thing. But you have, of course, the exigencies of the military wanting to say. So
Right.
it's again
It's
a conflict of our concern and our anxiety, which gives away from the patience and the dealing with the reality as it is, whatever might come.
Right. So the movie kind of goes there for a while, like figuring all these
How their language
pieces
works,
out.
yeah.
And then at some point, to kind of fast forward through the plot a bit,
Sure.
we get to a point where she makes headway with like the alien language, basically. And they're able
It's
to
figured
sort
out
of-
the key Rosetta Stone-ish kind of
exactly.
key to this thing.
Yeah, and then begins to communicate with the aliens
Mm-hmm.
in ways. And as the military drama kind of escalates, that like China and other nations are figuring things out too, they find out that the aliens start using a word that humans use for weapon. Right?
Or tool, or thing. Yeah, exactly.
What the Chinese think, though, is weapon.
Exactly.
Now, Louise is convinced that so basically what happens is they have this, like the Chinese as the sort of protagonists think that the aliens have come to use a weapon, or to use a weapon, to give a weapon to humans so as to use it against one another, that there's war, that they've
right.
come to destroy, where Louise is convinced that, in fact, there's a misunderstanding in language here.
Yes.
That weapon could be tool, could be something
Yep.
else, and in fact, they need to clarify. So there's this bit of drama. She's able to clarify, and in fact, she goes back in by herself to the spaceship, and is brought into like the alien side of things, and
Yes.
communicates sort of like mentally, and this weird communication with one of these aliens, and is given this sort of insight into what they've come to do, and that insight is not like to give a bomb, but to give a sort of, what the alien says at the time is that they've come to help the humans because in the future they'll need help from the human race.
Right.
And then you realize, okay, we're dealing with time and memory and these things here.
Yes.
And there have been hints throughout, but we learn that Louise is sort of given glimpses of her past and of her future and these things as the movie runs. And we come to find out that the aliens are sort of giving this tool so as to like deal well with time, like enter into a sort of a timeless understanding, I guess, and communication of who we are, what we are, and the rest. I don't know, maybe you could say a bit more.
Yeah,
about
the
that.
interesting part is with time travel, except in the most rarefied of physical quantum mechanical effects, it seems impossible in any sort of real way, especially information-wise. But they get around, so usually you have to use a black hole or some kind of spooky device. This movie, again, brilliant work on their part. They decided to forget the black hole standard way of doing time travel, but to use based off on the Safer-Whorf theory of language, which is a 20th, early late 19th, 20th century account of language, that language shapes how we think about the world. So if I think in certain words and certain ways and talk about particular grammar structures, that's how I see the world. So if my language doesn't have adjectives, then I don't see things moving more slowly or quickly because I can't conceptualize that. And there's something to that, as I think we mentioned before. But it means that for this in the movie there, you grant that hypothesis, and it means that their language is a circular language, which means that they don't have, so it's not linear, it's a circle, and let's just grant that this makes sense, and says that therefore, since their language is circular, they see reality circularly, so they don't have time in the way we do. They can go back and forth and this sort of thing. And as she learns to speak their language, she is going back and forth in time, in fact, seeing her future, which doesn't seem to be the future, but actually seems to be a memory to her, because we think in straightforward time, whereas this time is not straightforward.
Right. So that's been kind of a bare bones, in these sort of things, in reviewing a movie, you get a bare bones plot kind of summary. I guess in hearing that, if you've not seen the movie and you're listening to this and or watching this and not caring about spoilers, great.
Now it's time to.
Yeah. Well, it also.
We haven't revealed anything yet.
Right. It also might sound like a boring movie about linguistic grammar, syntax, and that sort of thing. I would say it's not. I think it's a beautiful movie and a compelling movie, because where the sort of rubber hits the road with memory and time and these sort of things is actually how the first scenes of the movies begin, and then what seem to be flashbacks through the movie, but then you realize, as you've just explained, as she becomes fluent in this alien language and thinking in terms of it, they're actually projections of the future, real projections. And the movie starts off, before the aliens come, with a sort of what do you call these in movies? Not a time lapse, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, kind of like a time lapse of Louise's life,
a compressed history of her life. Yeah,
with her daughter.
Yeah,
who you see these sort of like scenes of the daughter being, of her as a newborn, an infant, and growing up. It's just a couple minutes, and
it's kind of like Up. That if you watch the Disney movie, Pixar movie Up, it has that whole like tragic sequence at the start. Yeah,
right, and tragic indeed, because it seems like she's like a teenager, something around that, and the final scenes of these are her dying.
Yeah, she died of cancer or some illness.
The daughter's death. So as you're going through, so this is presented to you in the beginning, and then you cut to.
As if now she's alone teaching the university after having lost her daughter, and they've done it trickily such that you don't know who the father is, and Amy Adams looks basically the same. It's believable.
Amy Adams is the
Louise Banks. Yeah, that it's believable that she's now older, but than it was when you saw earlier. But yes.
Yeah. So. As the movie goes, and especially in the scene where she begins to realize
get the language down,
the language thing, we learn that this is in fact not a memory that we started out with, but what is coming.
It's the future.
It's the future.
Yeah.
And that her daughter she has her daughter after the encounter with the aliens.
Because one of what is his name? James Renner or something? Hawkeye from Marvel is the scientist, because you have to have a physicist in this. And they fall in love when they're solving these problems and saving the world from this sort of thing. And you realize as you're going through, at some point, everyone should have this realization. It's like Sixth Sense, that wait a minute, he's the father. They don't know each other yet before they met here, so this must be.
Yep.
This is the future.
Yeah. So the way the movie runs, if you could sort of put the movie into chapters, you start off with this, what you believe at the beginning is a look into the past of Louise's past, her daughter's death, and then you come into the present, and Louise is teaching the aliens come, and then you have these sort of encounters with the aliens, and then at the end, you have a sort of recapitulation of what happened. But it's not past, present, future, it's future, present, future.
That's right.
But you don't know that in there. Because, again, as Father Bonaventure was explaining, we think linearly. So we think past, present, future.
Right.
But what the movie presents is future, present, future.
Yes. There's no past, which is fascinating.
Right. And now here comes, like, the big problem. The big sort of issue of the movie is that, remember, we start with the future, right? So Louise has not had her child until she knows that she will have a child who will die of cancer. So she decides through becoming fluent in this alien language, thinking in their terms of time, she knows that if she were that she will have a child, this daughter, who is going to die a teenager of cancer. And she still decides to marry this guy that she falls in love with, who is part of this whole thing, and to have a child. Now, therein lies a problem, or a potential problem, like a problem in the movie. Is this right? Is this wrong? That she knows that the child she will have will die. She knows that with absolute certainty. The problem is further compounded because after the child's birth, not before, she tells her husband and the father what she fills them in on everything. So they've had the child. And there's a scene in the movie at the end when it recapitulates everything that you realize he's left her because of this.
The absent father. The father was absent in the earlier. He's absent because she's told him that she's kept from him what she actually knew about their child and this sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for me lies the big question, because he says, so there's a scene where the daughter and Louise are talking, and the father has just left. And the daughter asks, does he love me anymore? Something like that. And Louise says, no, we both love you. And, well, why did Dad leave? And she says, well, I did something and your father thought I shouldn't have, that I chose wrongly, that I made the wrong choice about something. So she doesn't tell the daughter, but that I made the wrong choice. And it leaves you wondering, what is the wrong choice? Is it that she knew that they would have a child who would inevitably die from cancer young and still decided to have a child? Is it that she didn't tell him this beforehand,
and let him be a part of this as well?
Decision.
Yeah.
Is it both? You know, what did she choose?
Yeah. Is it
wrongly?
mixed? Yeah. It's a very human, in a totally inhuman alien situation. There's the mixed trying to figure out, discern the intentions of another in deep, difficult situations. Involving things that are impossible to predict. We're really good at telling the intentions of what someone's doing when they're punching you in the face or something, like they're trying to hurt you. Yeah. Now, deeper intentions like trying to protect you from an oncoming car or something, or getting a tarantula off your face in a particular violent way. But we kind of have a general idea. But when you're dealing this kind of thing, intentions here, and I like how they keep it a bit ambiguous and ask you to think what you would assume. Right. Was his position, and then to say, well, is that, just like the projection, the military thing? I'd say it's a very self-referential movie that it allows you to enter into self-criticism and ask yourself, are you sure that you've done these things, that you've figured this right, and know what the aliens are intending, but even more so, what are the humans intending? Because that's how we can get so mixed up, I think, is projecting ahead and not paying attention to the details on it. So it's a beautiful ambiguity to me about the human condition from the alien condition.
Yeah. And I think, too, a scene that jumped out to me is when we're chapter 3, right, where the chapter 1 was the future that seemed like the past. Yes. Chapter 2 is the present, and chapter 3 is kind of the recapitulation of showing you what all happened. And chapter 3, Louise and her husband are sort of, they're at home together, and they're kind of dancing, and he looks at her and he asks, do you want to make a baby?
Yeah.
And you realize then what's happening.
Yes.
Like, for me, like, he has no clue.
Yes.
And she knows everything, because she looks at him, she thinks, and she smiles, and she says yes. And then they hug, and as the camera angle has both of their faces in the frame when they're having this very quick exchange, and then when they hug, it's they're hugging, and the camera comes around such that it's just Louise's face, and you see like her face, you see her eyes in that closing, and she, like, you can see that she knows what she just said yes to. Well, and for me, it's like, here's like, what is her husband's what is her husband's criticism? Like, what's his issue? But also, like, why does she choose what she chooses?
And I like it is so hard to depict the divine causality and providence with freedom. It's conceptually a disaster to do this. Dominicans, Jesuits have fought for centuries over, and the Church says, we're not going to settle this particular issue at this fine-grained analysis. But this movie just gives you a sliver of, in a sense, because for me, that's the moment where she is both free, entirely free to make this choice, for whether good or ill, but also that she knows exactly what the choice will entail and all of this stuff, and not just as a prediction, but like feels fated to it. It's already happened in a way, and so, but yet it's still good. Yet it's still, because she has decided, and built to her calculation, and I think as Catholics we would say, the life of a child, as no matter how short and what have you, is still good. We could bring in internal salvation questions here too, but the goodness of life, and I think mothers who have gone through very difficult pregnancies and difficult lives would still say, I loved my daughter or my son, no matter how long I had him, and I still love. And I wouldn't have, even the suffering, I wouldn't have changed that.
Right.
And I feel like with her, it's, in a sense, she's given a view of seeing that beforehand, but the sense that of it's still a good. It's still a great good. Despite the tragedy, it's still worth it. And there's a sense of provident God. God, if we believe, he orders all things sweetly and well, and yet we are free in these things, that we can, dance with him on that, and you just get a sliver of the strangeness of that relationship there in the movie. And it's just impossible to depict divine and human causality in human terms, but it just gives you just a feel for the weirdness, but also the settled rightness about it, which I like.
Yeah, and there's this sort of a sense of, as you're saying, kind of a divine view of creation too, in that our Lord knows. He knows what's going to. He knows that we're going to suffer in this fallen state before he creates. And yet he still chooses to create it. And I think there are a whole host of reasons why we could say that. One, he's not the cause of the suffering. Sure. He's he those sort of things.
There's still, and even in the story, there's secondary, primary cause. Did she cause her daughter to die? No. Was she a condition, a circumstance of it? Yes, but the proximate cause. In a sense, you could do the 2-level analysis on this, and it only is able to do this because you have this cool time travel through language possibility. So, as with any science fiction thing, the reason why we care about it is not because you like to nerd out, but because it allows you to ask deep questions about reality and philosophical conceptions in a way that you wouldn't otherwise get. It's like the laboratory of the mind, and this movie does that par excellence.
Yeah, and themes that we could talk about are. There are many,
forever.
Like memory,
and even
language.
The music.
Yeah.
The Max Richter is hauntingly beautiful. It's, again, the chiaroscuro. It's deeply tragic and sad, the music, but it's also desirable and beautiful
and inspiring.
Ways, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. For me, the sort of question of language and memory are interesting, but I think less so. I think as compared to the question of time, and even causality, as you were just kind of explaining, because those to me, language and memory, they're kind of mysteries, but they're kind of human mysteries, in ways. But time and sort of providence and those sort of things, and causality, it's like
that's the big ticket items.
Yeah, that's
what you read after the first 9 books of Augustine's Confessions.
Yeah.
Then we're going to do the real business on memory and time before creation. It's interesting. It'd be an interesting movie to show alongside teaching Augustine's Confessions, because he goes exactly to memory, language, and time.
Yeah. And she has these lines in the movie. One of them is sort of like, I'm not sure if I believe in beginnings or endings, but in days that define our lives. And it's like that, and that's right in the beginning. She's sort of she's kind of narrating that chapter 1, past or present kind of part, and you're just drawn into what does, because we think so linearly, but how do we exist in the cosmos, in the mind of God? How does that work? And it doesn't answer the questions.
No, but it directs you to, it opens up again these slivers. It's like you get a quick look at something, you say, yeah, I remember, there's something right about that, and it opens, by magic trick. This is how science fiction works, because it's not real. But it's a conceptual illusion of the mind that allows you just to get a little view conceptually of what these inconceptual things or unconceptual things are. So it's, again, magic trick and illusion, but important because they're real. They're not, the illusion is trying to help us to see something that is real and matters in our lives in terms of God's providence and time and memory and meaning and significance and our future and our fate. But it does it through, it's 2 hours long. So if you haven't thought about watching this movie yet, I hope you've decided that it's worth watching.
Yeah. There's this line too at the beginning that she says, I used to think that this was the beginning of your story when you're looking at what you think is the past. I used to think that this is the beginning of your story. Memory is a strange thing. We're so bound by its time, by its order. And she's just kind of commenting on her reflections on time. But it also it kind of inspires the question of is birth the beginning? Where do you, in the mind of God? And it's just everything is sort of, I think in some ways, and this might be my final thought, and then we'll get your final thoughts. In some ways, where we very easily idolize ourselves. It's very easy to put yourself in the center of the cosmos and think that everything revolves around my coming into being and my et cetera, even sometimes with good intentions. But this movie kind of blows that out of the water because it doesn't give you a sort of, this is when I enter the cosmos. This is when I begin. It's, it's kind of according to our linear thought you do, but not in the mind of God and not in the mind of these aliens. It's just like a whole different thing. So
yes.
I like that kind of like, it's kind of
atemporal
yeah.
aspect, because time, of course, is created. It's a creature, as Augustine says. And I like this aspect as well, in that it allows you to see that we're not the progenitors of our story, or the promulgators of it in a particular time sequence, and that defines, so that our birth, for instance, defines time in this way, but rather it's a deeper story, a deeper fitting, and yet at the same time not the other side of fatalism, in the sense that there's no way determinism, like this is just what's going to happen, blah blah blah. No, it's again the combination of freedom. These were free choices made, and yet in an encompassing schema that is also already known and set forth. And it's that freedom-determinism relationship that you get here, which is to do with time and causality, which is is fundamental in our relationship with God and with others when we step back occasionally and think about it. But it does it in a way that doesn't bang back and forth between whether we're totally free or totally determined, but keeps them in that mysterious, almost incomprehensible connection through an optical illusion.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't seen the movie, see the movie.
Yeah.
It's great. It's based on a book or a short story too, which I haven't read.
I haven't either.
That'd be worth reading.
I don't know. It might not be as
maybe.
It's like Blade Runner and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Blade Runner, the movie is much better than the book. I know Philip K. Dick. He's great. Fine. But
fair enough.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll stay away from it. I'll just watch the movie again in another 6 months or something, because it's great. So
that's great.
There you have it. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Godsplaining. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Like the episode, subscribe on YouTube, do all of those things. Leave a 5-star review. That's super helpful for us. If you'd like to donate to the podcast through Patreon, follow the link in the description or the show notes. There you will also find links to shop our merchandise for upcoming dates and information on Godsplaining pilgrimages and retreats. Check that out. Thanks again to everybody who supports us financially and through your prayers. Know of our prayers for you. And until next time, God bless.